What's up, flooring family? Welcome to the Huddle. We're here every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Central, to discuss maintaining forward progress in your flooring career. With me, as always, Mr. Daniel and Jose Gonzalez of Preferred Flooring out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Today, we got a less serious topic, but very serious in practice.
Depending on how you're looking at it.
Yeah, and I'm sure all of us installers have some of these, but it's flooring failures and horror stories. So, let's honor the old Halloween and get scared by remembering some, I've got a few catastrophes to share. So if you've been in this business for any length of time, you probably have some too. So if you're watching us live on Facebook or one of the channels, chime in, tell us some of your stories. If you watch us on YouTube later, share them in the comments. Consider giving us a like and subscribe. It's always appreciated, and it helps us to continue doing what we do. We do this for the industry, and you guys are our fuel when you comment and let us know what you're thinking, and give us some good feedback. And heck, if you don't like it, give us a thumbs down. It all matters, baby. So
we need that feedback too, right? You gotta get better somehow.
All right. Well, I was considering having a guest today, like another flooring contractor, to share their horror stories, but I don't know that they were so willing or excited as I am to share some of them. So let's get right to it, guys. What first off, when did you first started? What year did you guys first start installing flooring?
98.
98 for me.
Well, I started right after you did in that summer.
So I started in 95. We're about the same era here. So,
yep.
And how long before you had your first holy beep moment?
98.
It was 90 because I started in January of 98, and I believe it was like
you had plenty of time left in the year to.
Yeah, I did, and it was a long time, but. Starting with that one, I'll get started.
I thought we'd come out the gate with our first.
All right, so we were doing it was like a multi-purpose room at a church, I believe, right? And it was all what I was told was sheet vinyl, right? All right, so we started installing it, and I'm just I was just a helper at that point, and we got everything done. We got everything welded. It looked pretty good, and we knocked it out in about 4 or 5 days. Then a couple of days later, got a phone call saying that it was failing and couldn't figure out why. So they went there and took a look at it, and I went there with them, and I remember them cutting it open at a seam and just being able to lift it right up off the floor. And it was waves everywhere. I was like, what could be happening? And and the argument was, we did it exactly like we do it every other time. I'm just doing what I was asked, what I was told. Come to find out, it was linoleum, not sheet vinyl. So we did it exactly like we do sheet vinyl every time. And I tell you what, everything about it was wrong. The notches, the open time, flash time.
Definitely didn't wet set it.
Oh no, definitely did not wet set it.
Your linoleum. Well, go ahead and tell them the difference. Just for the tile guys or the carpet guys out there, tell them the difference between the two, because there's a pretty significant difference here. And
right. So linoleum is going to have a jute backing on it. And it's kind of that jute needs something to grab, right? So you got to wet set it. With a vinyl, you're letting the adhesive, depending on what type of vinyl, right? But, if you're talking about homogeneous vinyl, it's vinyl all the way through. So if you wet set it, that adhesive is never going to set up depending on what's underneath it. So it just depends on what you're working with, but
you need larger trowel size on linoleum. You go in wet.
Roll it.
Yeah. I can imagine you use a 3/32 or something notch trowel on it.
Yeah, we used everything about it was wrong. And
so what'd you do?
We ended up having to cut it apart at every seam. and we were actually able to roll it back out of the adhesive in place, scrape all the adhesive off, start from scratch, roll it back into the adhesive the right way. And I do remember there being a couple double welds on the seams. I mean, it definitely wasn't my proudest moment, right? But I wasn't in control of that one either. But that is what made me start reading everything, is knowing that my name was associated with that, knowing that.
How many yards or square foot yards were we talking here?
Well, this was because this was one of the summers where I was actually working. So I was there. I don't think I was there for the first part, but I think I was there for the second part.
Yeah. If you can imagine like a elementary size gymnasium, a multi-purpose room, that's about the size
I
it
think
was.
it might have been one of the band rooms or something like that.
Yeah,
Several hundred yards.
It was not small. It was not small by any means. I tell you
All
what,
right.
though, it did
So
go pretty quick the
you-
second time.
you had such poor bond that you were able to roll it back and scrape up the glue and reinstall it, and it looked good afterwards.
Correct. And
Aside of a few saddle seams here and there.
yeah. I don't remember every step along the way. I do remember it didn't look like a brand new install the second time around. It didn't look like a brand new install the first time around. But lesson learned, learn to read the adhesive, learn to read the instructions that come with the rolls. Just save yourself the hassle. Oh man. I have a lot more than just that one, but that was like
The first one.
Well, I figured we'd start with the first one. I mean,
Yeah.
it's out of the gate, and I think most of this is going to speak very well to what we preach on this channel, which is get trained, proper education and with the proper amount of experience so that you can actually absorb the stuff. So I started out in carpet in '95. About 6 months later, I was put in charge of a job. It was a high school. At the time, it was the largest high school in Kansas. 11,000 yards of carpet, mainly in classrooms. And it was a J&J piece, I remember, and it was a double cut. And I met with the tech rep, and they brought this little brand new cutter. It was a glass looking cutter. We have tons of them now, but it was brand new back at the time, and it was a double cutter. So I went through and learned how to use that. I was blowing through this job. Literally, we were laying 500-600 yards a day, me and two guys, just killing it. I thought, I'm an installer, dude. I got this all figured out. I am an installer. And at the end of that thing, the job turned out well, other than it had a little bit of a fading issue in the carpet that the school ended up accepting. But at the end of the day, I really felt like I was I thought I was the man. I had installed all that carpet. I'd only been doing it 6 months. I thought, yeah. So I get put on I will not mention the client because they are a client of mine now, as my own company at Stuart and Associates. But I went to do a very large gathering room, like a big conference room at a manufacturer's place. I thought you double cut everything, baby. I thought that's how carpet was installed. And it was almost a solid black, heavy, big textured loop. And so the installer that was supposed to be with me there got sick, and my boss was like, you got it. No direction. Again, these are horror stories for a reason. So never, anybody listening, don't think you're an installer after 5-6 months of learning how to double cut, and that's your only experience. So I go in here and lay the entire job, and it was probably 600 or 700 yard room. and I double cut every seam. It looked fantastic, I thought, as soon as I was done with it. And I walk away, you come back, and everything mushroomed. It was the worst looking seams you could imagine. The thickness, the other part was the first carpet I had installed was a really tight loop. And when you double cut that, it stayed together, everything stayed tight, seam sealed it, it looked good. The seam, it mushroomed and there was seam seal everywhere. It looked good until it dried up. I cannot tell you how terrible it was, but at the end of the day, I double cut every single one of them damn seams, and it should have been row, but and it mushroomed so bad that you could see the backing on every seam. And I thought I seam sealed it enough. I had no idea. And you just can't double cut a carpet like that. So told my CFI guys out there, there's different ways of cutting seams, and you probably learned that in R1, but because I was never trained, I thought that's how you did every single thing. I thought you just overlapped it, cut it. Some of it I was cutting with my knife, but that glass cutter got some work on that project as well.
There was a project that we were doing nights, and we were doing a bunch of Jenny Craig's, like when they were a thing. And we were doing some, and there was another crew that was doing some, same company, right? And we were doing ours, and they were like, why is it taking you guys so much longer to do yours? And they're knocking theirs out. So one time we had to go visit one of their job sites, and what they're doing is that what you said, they're just boom, boom, double cut and go. And it was a 1/2-inch pattern, and it was not good carpet.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. So
yeah. Lesson learned there. I ended up getting demoted to helper again, which I should have never been promoted. But and by the way, my promotion did not bring any extra money, so nor did the demotion. But they decided probably don't let me go at my own accord, because it's a bad recipe to put a guy like me that'll just go at things like he's killing snakes and thinks he knows something. I'm gonna go after it. And I did completely had to replace every square inch of that carpet, and I glued it down like this was still solvent-based adhesive. So it was a nightmare to get up. You've done a tear up on new carpet, I'm sure, at some point. This was brand new and stuff that we had to wait another, 2 weeks to tear it up, because they were going to have some events in there, and they were like, we got to have these events, so you have to come back over the weekend. We had 6 guys in there. Glue was everywhere. I'm not sure which was more of a nightmare, actually, the tear up or the day after I installed it. And I thought I had knocked it out of the park, or a few days after it was installed. So that's my very, very first, and that didn't take long. That was 6 months after I started, 6-8 months after I started flooring.
Somebody trusted you after 6 months. I tell you what.
Yeah. That's what happens without the proper training. So,
and like you said, I think we've all been there where you go in and you're like, looks great. And then someone else walks in there and it's like, what did you do? Like,
yeah. And I thought when my boss said like it was totally effed up and then I messed up the whole job, I thought maybe it just needs tractored. That's what Brian, this guy that taught me, maybe it just needs some extra tractoring. Well, it needed a heck of a lot more than that, I'll tell you that.
Get a yarn stuck in the wheel.
Yeah. So that's my very first carpet story, but I got one for sheet vinyl. I was doing a assisted living, and this was kind of before moisture. It was right about the time all the moisture problems really started coming up. Like, I don't think as an industry we really knew. I was probably 3, 4, or 5 years in at this point, and I don't know that the industry really knew. They certainly hadn't gotten the chemistry down on the water-based adhesives yet. But also moisture testing was not like done on every job. It wasn't as big of a requirement, I guess. It just didn't seem like it was that big a deal. Now that could be because I was still a newbie at 5 years or whatever. I was still pretty new in the industry. But also our company that I worked for at the time, they just didn't care about that kind of thing. Anyway, come to find out, we installed all this sheet vinyl and all the first floor sheet vinyl. The contractor calls me. I had started my company by this point, by the way. So it was my client. And client calls and says, there's something really wrong. There's all these lines and like all this stuff. It's like the adhesive is mushing or something. So we get out there, I go look at it, and it wasn't horrific quite yet. So I told him, well, you know, it'll dry out. I had no idea. Obviously, it didn't dry out. By the time we went back, he calls and he says, hey, it's kind of leveled out, but it seems like it's just floating. We get out there, and you could literally slap the vinyl and kind of see the water move underneath it. We cut it open, and it's just a flood of water coming through. It was the worst, still today, probably the worst moisture issue that I've ever experienced. Back then, you kind of got away with a lot. The owner ended up paying for it, or the GC did, accepted responsibility for the slab being wet. It was a new construction project. And they had some irrigation issues that was adding water, but come to find out it was kind of under the water table. So there was a lot of problems that, kind of pointed it that way. It was the GC's responsibility, but we never moisture tested it. And at the end of the day, every square inch of it had to be torn up. We didn't do mitigation at the time. There was just a few companies that was doing that at that point, and there was only a couple of products that you could use. I mean, we're talking early 2000s. And so we tore all the vinyl up, dry, sucked all the water up. And when I tell you water, it had completely emulsified the adhesive, 100%. It was like just colored water under there. So we got it all up, vacuumed up all the water. Then they came in and blasted, did mitigation, and leveled it. And then we came back in and laid vinyl again. But lesson there is moisture test.
Yeah.
One moisture test with that type of slab would have been clear as day that there's a problem long ahead of having to go through that. So from a expense standpoint, that's probably one of the highest. I have some others, but that's probably one of the highest. And I have a more recent one that I'll share in a moment, but I don't want to steal all the fun.
I know. I don't know where Daniel.
So it's on you guys now. It's the ping pong has been hit back to you.
I got it for you, and it's similar. You reminded me of it. Actually, is we were working out at a hospital out in Carson City doing a basement, and it had a bunch of borders and patterns that that swooped and swished down the corridor. Dude, it looked pristine. It took a lot of layout, a lot of artistry, a lot of hard work and concentration, making templates so that way I can duplicate patterns. And then, a week later, get a phone call. This is after we're done. Get a phone call. It's like, there's some weird things that are on the vinyl. We don't know how to get them off. It looks like somebody was writing on the vinyl. How do you get stains off? So we go there, take a look at it, and look down. And sure enough, it's we wrote the drop lengths on the back of the vinyl, right? So because of plasticizer migration, everything went through. So it was all backwards numbers and writing, and it was red and it was black. Not only that, is there was no moisture test done. This was an old slab, old building. So we had high moisture content, hydrostatic pressure on top of that. So the first thing they noticed was our marker. The second thing they noticed when we started pulling it back was the high moisture, and then the pressure. And then the GC actually took accountability for that one as well. We did not do a moisture test. We did not do this. We did not do that.
They never. So when that job, when it rained, the vinyl would swell up.
Yes, yep.
And then once the rain stopped and then it dried out, it would lay back flat like nothing had ever happened.
And that was when we came to the conclusion, and as far as having the knowledge that I have now, I didn't have it back then, but I remember talking to the GC and just asking a series of questions, and that did come out. And I was like, and I go look outside, and I'm like, yeah, we're actually running downhill. And so what? I was like, man, I know that we wrote out it with marker, but I don't think it's my fault that this is failing like that. So that was
a quick note on that for all you sheet vinyl guys that maybe not know. You probably do, but marker or things like that, you put it on the don't put it on the back of your vinyl for sure, but don't mark your concrete with Sharpie. Make sure you're looking for
no marker for any resilient is our new rule.
Yeah, if we only thing in our pouches and on our person is a pencil, whatever we're doing resilient. There's no ifs, ands, buts. I don't even like to use the colored pencils like Home Depot, because I just don't want to risk it, right? Like,
yeah,
just don't want to risk it. And
another thing
I had no idea.
Another thing that brings up is I remember a job that had this purple blotchiness underneath the vinyl in every room. We did a bunch of patient rooms, and under the cabinet, it was a ADA cabinet. So underneath there, in every single room, there was some level of like this blotchy kind of stain. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. You guys had to drop something on it. What it ended up being is the plumber's purple primer had dripped down on every one of them rooms where I guess he was just right there doing it, gets on the concrete. We had no idea that would go through the patch, through the top, through the vinyl, and just not, it was like it was a picture taken. That's how clear it ended up being once that stain worked all the way through.
Yeah, and we're finding that a lot with cutback adhesive, right? Because they're like, we'll just go in there and throw some patch on, throw the vinyl, and in one of the hospitals that we've been doing work in, it's all bleeding up, and it's puddles, right, where it's super thick, and that'd be the first areas that come, and then it's like looks like pools everywhere. And on during COVID, we were doing a brand new hospital, and they were self-leveled everything, and then they were going in and doing some ceiling work, setting stuff up for like the MRI machines and stuff that were going in, and they did their layout on the ground in marker, and we had rubber going in, a white rubber, and I went to the GC and I'm like, come and look at this. He was like, I told them not to use marker. Like, this is one of the GCs that will contact us, and they know how particular resilient is. So they're like, what needs to happen? What can't we do? And they base their, I forget what they call it, but like their handbook that they have for their employees and contractors, they'll come to us and say, hey, can you review this and let us know what needs to be changed? What can we do? What can't we do? So that's one of their rules is on their job sites, they tell people no marking on the floor with markers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody else did the self-leveler, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't see it until it bled through.
No,
Yeah,
I
it'll
didn't.
bleed. I'm not sure how far that stuff will bleed, but I bet our skim on those rooms. Now, this is a different chemical, obviously, but that primer came through a good 3-coat skim coat, probably a 1/16 of an inch thick, or maybe even closer to an 1/8 inch. And it went all the way through that and all the way through the vinyl.
You know, what sucks too is like when we were learning to encapsulate things like that, like the cutback. Go if the patch wasn't approved, we prime it and then prep over the primer. It was still finding a way through. So now some markers too. Now we just grind. We got to grind all this.
And one of the biggest, we used to use clear spray to spray our lines down and stuff.
I thought that was the best idea.
And then we went through like the Forbo class, and they're like, that's a foreign material on your floor now. Is it doing you any good? It's a bond breaker. Like it's only as good as what you just sprayed on there now.
And he's talking about
we used hairspray forever.
That's so that's expensive too. But we use the inverted marking spray, just a clear one is what I used. Saw somebody using it. I was like, oh, that's clear. But yeah, so my marks don't disappear. Sweet. Go buy a case.
Great idea.
Yeah,
it was for a minute.
We did it all the time. DCT, I still
gonna try and come in pretty soon. I think he has some stories too. And then Dave Garden was wondering how long you were an installer on your last story, on your sheet vinyl story.
Okay. Well, I was about 5 years in, and I had been doing vinyl for probably a year.
And I think that's the misconception too in our industry is people are like, oh, you've been doing it for 5 years, you should already know, which in some cases, yeah, but in other cases, it's like you're working with a new material. It's like if I go to a job and I'm doing ceramic, I'm not going to know 100% of everything just like I do on like Resilient, but I would ask questions to someone that does know what they're doing before I go and do something.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that changed for me was I quit being so damn egotistical and started asking questions. After a few failures, I started learning like I need to ask someone who actually knows if I don't, and realize that I probably don't know. It wasn't until years in that I became what I would say pretty doggone good sheet vinyl installer, carpet installer, that kind of stuff. But that was after training and plenty of experience. And again, I worked for a company that it was just like, well, he did this job once, send him out there. He'll do it. All right. He'll figure it out. And so needless to say, we went through quite the large amount of the hard lessons, not the lessons you learn when you go to a good, flooring installation course, the kind that cost you money.
Yeah.
Right. That's how I learned how to do Flash Cove myself. Was he ended up quitting, and then we had an entire new medical building with a bunch of Flash Cove, and they were like, oh, you worked with Jose, so you're on this project now.
You must know how to do it since you guys are related. You'll
do fine.
and that's I mean, I pretty much had to teach myself, but that's what I did. This was, what year was it at this point? 2005?
Yeah, I was probably 26, so you were 20. So yeah, I would say
maybe 2006, 2007, something like that. And it's like, all right, I did a bunch of reading. There was no Facebook groups and stuff like we have now. And it's, as far as I know, it turned out fine, but I definitely didn't do it right. I can tell you that.
Well, that's another tricky thing is like, sometimes you can do it wrong and it looks good and somehow it works out.
So, yeah,
and then you do it wrong, and then that it's those times that it comes back to bite you. You know what I mean?
And that's subjective too, right? Like if you don't know you're doing it wrong, then it must be right. It looks right.
Yeah,
to
dude,
you.
I had no clue on either one of the two I mentioned, especially the carpet. I had no clue that I didn't even know how to run a row. What are you talking about running a row? Like, to me, I thought you cut off a little bit of salvage, measure over, make sure you got 2 inches, run this magical cutter down this carpet, and you got a good seam. You know, that was just how I thought the whole industry worked. That's the need for proper training.
Yeah, education period. You're right.
Yeah. So I got one more, and this isn't necessarily just a install error, but maybe a little lesson on what not to do on the back side of it. So we did a multi-level apartment building, basically, and it was it had a sound barrier underlayment under the LVT, and we installed both products, and it looked great. And then they had a few floods. The windows leaked, and so obviously, like, most of the floor just came up. It just problem. They filed, whatever. The GC told us to find replace the bad stuff. So we went in, tore up, and I was not installing at the time. By this time, we had other installers, but the manager on the job told our installers, just take up what's bad, what's floating, or what's not stuck, and then pull it up and replace it. Replace that, and then a few weeks later, more of it comes up. A few weeks later, more of it comes up. A few weeks later, more of it. A few weeks later, the stuff we replaced was coming up. The lesson here is the moisture had gotten into the building, into nooks and crannies, and I'm talking a flood. I'm talking real bad rain event that, was major water event. Stop, make your GC, identify the problem, and direct you on what to replace, and make sure that's in writing. That's been that was a major problem. It's been nothing but a headache. It took forever to get anywhere on resolution. And although that's not my install error, it wasn't really an install error, except for a error in judgment. And replacing, just going in, taking, and we left this is probably a problem, but left the underlayment that had gotten wet and installed right back over it. So there was now, that was by direction of the GC as well. But my point here is, you have to stop and make them tell you exactly what to do, and then what to replace, or what needs fixed, and then you can follow that up with your plan of action in writing. Better yet, tell them to do all the demo, and you come back, moisture test, and provide moisture testing results, and then, if ready, install. But that was probably the most expensive problem that we've ever had, and it was an error in judgment. Like, we should not have been. We're not building envelope experts. My manager at the time was a ex-tie salesman, that I turned into a flooring guy. Like, you can't expect, even if he was a professional flooring installer, he's not a building envelope expert. He doesn't know the migration of water through an entire building. We can understand a little bit of it as it works through a slab, but not a multi-level concrete building.
Right. And I think that's like what you're talking about, when you don't know compared to when it happens when you do know. It's kind of different, right? Because you're like, hey, I'm gonna go over here and just do whatever I think needs to be done. When you do know what's going on, that's when there was another hospital project. The main pipe for the water feed had a solder that failed, and we already installed some of it. We already installed the hallway, and we were going into the rooms. We had a blotter layer. The concrete had barrier one in it, so it's not going to go into the concrete, right? But that blotter layer, and it's like there was probably 50 people pushing brooms of water to whatever drains we could find in the showers and stuff like that. And there was so much water in there, the GC pretty much came up to me and he says, what do we have to do from here? I think that's kind of the level that you're looking for, right? Let me make some phone calls. Let me see what this prep manufacturer says. Let me see what the flooring manufacturer says, and then we'll go from there. And it's like, that's what I did. I made the calls. They said, this is what you have to do. I made them put a dehumidifier in every single room. And I think they had 3 in the hallway. The hallway was probably only like 50 foot long. So, I mean, and it was running for a week before I stepped foot back in there. And then you have to start doing some destructive tests. I'm like, I got to start pulling up tiles and seeing what we're dealing with underneath. And luckily, everything that I told them to do, they did, and everything actually turned out really good. How much water was everywhere.
It survived.
Wow.
It was Nora, so it's a wet set adhesive, and when you go through the class, they'll basically tell you install it right, do whatever you want with water, it's going to be fine, right? And that's exactly it. Like, I was struggling pulling up the pieces that were flooded still. So
I think Daniel, or we have a preferred flooring TikTok video of water just pouring into one of the job sites.
Yes. And they told me
yes,
post it anywhere, but it was already up and people were liking it, so I had to leave it up. I did, like, any logos that were anywhere are not visible.
Yeah, it was when they said, hey, it flooded. Did you see the video? What video? Oh my goodness, like, that's for real, like right now? Yeah.
So did you have to replace any of it, or did it all, most of it?
I didn't have to replace any of it. The entire blotter layer dried out with the dehumidifiers, and we were good to go.
Yeah, was that a 1-story situation?
Yeah, luckily this happened on the main floor and not the second floor, because we did the second floor and moved down to the main floor.
Yeah, so a lot of the on the previous job I was just talking about, they couldn't believe that moisture would stay in the concrete, afterwards. Levels,
right,
several floors above I was like, yeah, moisture will actually travel up columns and stuff, guys. I mean, we've tested elevated concrete slabs, and at the column lines, you can get a spike in moisture. We've seen it plenty of times. So yeah, anyway, good old moisture stories.
Well, I think that's the misconception, is people think that moisture is just water, but they don't take into consideration that there's vapor coming out of the earth 100% of the time.
Yeah. All day, every day.
Yeah. Well, I was going to pull up some good old Facebook, because I see on Facebook's, the different rooms, all these disaster stories, but decided that wasn't probably I didn't want to like have anybody called out, but I seen a lot of like emulsified adhesives and things like that as I was going through. So moisture is like still one of those biggest items you got to pay attention to. Being more educated today than I ever was when I installed about moisture, understanding the adhesives, you almost have to be part chemist in flooring anymore and understand what does what and how to prep correctly and which type of patch to use in this situation with this adhesive. And so study up, know what you're installing. That's your first defense. And make sure you're trained. Make sure you've got the education that goes along with your experience. It'll make you really good. I sure wish I would have.
I would say don't be afraid to ask your reps, your tech reps, for a little bit of adhesive, some prep material, so you can test it out yourself. Because you might not like it. Someone might send something that you're not familiar with, and you right away you don't like it because of the way it is calling for you to mix it or how to use it. So you just dismiss it. Right. You don't pay attention to the details after that. You're like, oh, this is crappy anyway.
We had a tech rep in here when he was in here last week.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it wasn't the tech rep, maybe it was the sales rep, but he was like, I'm gonna leave these this is our new skim coat. I want you guys to test it out. And I was like, oh yeah, we got some carpet coming up. And he just looks at us and he's like, we always test underneath carpet. We do not test under resilient. Under resilient,
we're using what is good, what we know is going to work. What's funny? Maybe think about this nightmare on a project. It was a multi-level building when you said that, and we were doing electrical closets in rubber tile. And I remember we started on the lower level, and all of these electrical closets were lined up all the way up, right? Because the conduit came up through the penetrations. And I remember telling the gentleman that was with us to make sure that he used like expandable foam and taped everything off, so when we self-leveled, it wasn't going down. He said he did. I mean, he took a lot of time, and I just remember that phone call, like,
all it takes is a hole this big.
We have to get here and clean all this up. And sure enough, all that self-leveler, that was a low spot, and everything went that way from like the third or fourth floor down all the conduit that was finished painted on the electrical box, in the boxes, on the back of the box, all the way down to the basement. And I'll just never forget that.
I had the same exact thing happen at a hospital we do a lot of work in, and they now have a rule: no self-leveler, none. You can't drag it, do whatever else you have to do, but you cannot use self-leveler. They've had it happen multiple other times, but it takes the smallest a hole. Yeah. And they fire cocked everything, thought they had everything. We figured fire cocking is supposed to stop
everything,
fire and smoke, and so it's surely going to stop water. Well, you're assuming that guy did a perfect job, and we started self-leveling. This wasn't that long ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, and it went down, sad to say, into the pediatric ICU area. Luckily, the main room that it got like really bad in was a unoccupied room, but it was quite the lesson. Like, you might as well. I'm scared. I'm fearful after that one to pour self-leveler on elevated slabs.
You know what?
You just never know, especially remodels where, there's an old hole, they fill it with concrete. Well, it just doesn't take anything. That stuff is so loose. You do so. I'm sure most people on here have done self-leveler, as far as like even the audience, you know how self-leveler is.
Yeah.
And it's so loose that it'll go down floors on floors if you're not careful, like yours.
Marlo said he had to go down an elevator shaft.
Oh God. That's
that's
worthy of a Halloween story right there. Jeez.
You want to know what's a real nightmare? Is when you do a project for another flooring company and no one did moisture testing, even though it says their contract says you need to do it. This contract says we're not going to do it. It's on you. And us, the installer, go in, and your friend that comes and does the inspection on the failure. That's a nightmare. From out of state. Yeah. And that was recent, a couple of years ago. Yeah. And it's like, we did what we were supposed to do, and it was like, well, I can't really say anything bad about you, but high moisture content, brother. It's like,
Actually, I think that test came out because they didn't have the HVAC on like they said it.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what else on moisture testing? Make sure you're logging it. If you're doing it and you're an installer doing it for a shop or whatever the scenario, log it. Like if you're doing RH, take pictures, like timestamp that stuff. One of the first questions you're going to get asked on a failure is, did you moisture test? Especially if it's sheet vinyl. And
So we're doing a bunch of
that would be a good episode right there.
Yeah, because we have to go do moisture testing starting tomorrow, and we're on a project with a bunch of LVT. And I contacted him a couple weeks ago, said, you guys need to get the moisture testing done because I need to know the readings to make sure we're good. He said, don't need to.
It's brand new concrete.
It's a brand new concrete. You don't need to. I said, no. And I sent them the document right from the manufacturer. It says moisture testing is required on all resilient floor covering projects. And Shaw is really good about this too, because right in the document, it also states in there, the installer is not responsible to moisture test, but we are responsible to get the results. And I sent him that, and he still came back with, it's new concrete. No, crystals on the project. I said, hey, ask them, tell them that we need the results. They didn't get them. And it's like, okay, we can test it. Right, we're certified, so let's try and go that route. And they agreed, so we're going to start tomorrow, which just sucks because it pushes us back a couple of days, but I mean, it's got to get done.
Well, good on you for making sure it happens, because there's nothing worse than getting asked for your results in a moisture problem.
Well, that's where
you don't have them, or you could.
Garden says that we learn from our own mistakes, and there's been a time or two where Shaw, right in there where Shaw says we're not responsible for the test, but we're responsible to get the results. And you learn from, oh, I didn't ask you for results and now it's failing, so my bad.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where you learn.
Yeah. Well, I could keep going but I don't want to just talk about the bad stuff. What I do want to talk about is the lessons of all this is understanding that ask questions is the biggest lesson I learned early on. If you're installing, we've got a guy that's been installing maybe for 2 to 3 years, and he's one of those naturals that kind of picked it up really well in the ceramic tile world, and he's wanting to go out and be a sub. He's only been doing it for like 2 or 3 years, 2 years. So you just don't know what you don't know. So I encourage every younger in the industry kind of guy ask the questions, understand your limitations, understand you probably haven't been taught everything at 2 years, and you have scenarios you're going to run up against. So if you're going to go out there, you better be willing to, swallow the ego and ask questions, because that was my problem. And it cost me a lot of pain. I mean, I messed some stuff up when I first started installing. So obviously we preach it all the time on this channel about getting properly trained on the flooring products and making sure that you have enough experience to even get trained. There's plenty of times when an advanced training is not appropriate because you just don't know what you don't know. I use Schluter's, their 2-day shower workshop. It's not hard. Have you guys been to that?
No.
Have you ever? Okay, so it's not hard or anything, but the thing is if you haven't learned regular like installation of ceramic tile thin set, the most basic, if you have not learned that, you have no right doing a shower anyway, and so that training in particular is to me somebody who's been doing it a while. The key that the point that I'm trying to make is ask questions, make sure you're seeking out training and you're seeking out the opportunities to get better. Lean on people in the industry that have learned the lessons maybe the hard way, and listen, and that'll help a lot.
Because even like right now, Kendall is asking, what is the best self-leveling product? And that's a relative question. What do you guys use, Paul? What is your guys' top?
What's your go-to?
Our most common is Mapei Ultra Plan Easy. That's our most commonly used product. I would say one of the freaking most awesome products from a result standpoint is Uzine. They got a we did a big Home Depot that had to be mitigated and self-leveled. And I tell you what, I took pictures when it was wet and it literally looked like a mirror. And then when it dried, it was absolutely perfect. We installed Nora rubber and rubber tile over it. And when it was done, the job looked freaking fantastic. And I was really, really impressed with Uzine's product. So that, if we have plenty of time, we'll use Nova Plan, but we've used Shernox depending on the scenario that you're in. And that's why it's kind of relative. It's like, what is the use case and
Right.
which one of them fit best to your use case. But our day in, day out, because typically you just don't have time to wait 24, 48 hours for it to dry, is Ultra Plan Easy.
Okay. And with us, our go-to is Utzine. Our go-to is Utzine, but like you said, what are you going over? What's the use going to be? Because there's sometimes when I call our rep and I'm like, hey, this is what's going on, and he's like, yeah, none of our products. So then
Shernox has a lot of really cool use case products. So to answer his question, they've got, we did a big ballroom where they wanted to expose concrete. So we ended up putting an acrylic sealer over AP, and this was a multi product substrate. So some of it was like a lightweight concrete, some of it was just old 50-year concrete, some of it was just poured 6 months ago, some of it was like, it was a hodgepodge it was like a quilt of a substrate. Nobody else wanted to touch it from a adherence standpoint, even. And not just that, you may have crack lines come through or any of that. That is a possibility no matter what product you use if there's movement. This was just like, there was no other product to go over it. And Shernox, that AP was with, I forget what primer we used, SHP maybe? Yeah. And dude, I was in there we did this probably 4 years ago. I was in there a few months back, and it still looks great.
Kevin's on. What's up, Kevin?
The product itself, like I remember, like Daniel saying, you have the certain scenarios, but whenever we're like, we don't know what to use, we do call Shernox. Hey, this is the scenario. Send me pictures, send me information. Let's see what we can figure out.
But I mean, any manufacturer is going to have a good system. It's just following that system. Like we're Ardex certified. Ardex makes great products. I mean, you think about feather finish in general, that's the name that comes to mind, right? I mean, Ardex was a pioneer in the underlayment space.
As far as I'm concerned, everyone's trying to replicate what they had.
They were definitely the godfather of good floor. I would say their feather finish was the staple of the entire industry, and probably still is for the most part.
Feather finish, K15 and SDP. I mean, those were what I was introduced with. That's what I used a lot of. And
so every product's going to have a good, every manufacturer has a really, good product line. It's just not all of them are, you just can't use one and say, I'm going to use this for everything. So yeah, I hope that provided, between what you guys just said and all that, provided some clarity there.
And speaking about like horror stories and stuff, the best thing you can do on any project is document everything.
Yeah.
Take pictures of everything. This was hospital project, and someone else self-leveled, and like we were working upstairs, someone was self-leveling downstairs, but we were going to do the install. And I went down there and I'm looking at it, and you can see it just going into these joints, right? And I thought they were cut joints, and I go to the GC and I'm like, hey, this ain't right. Oh yeah, 100%. They're only 1.5 inches deep. I said, no, those are not 1.5 inches deep. I guarantee it. So I'm taking pictures of everything. I go back the next day. and everything looks great except for at that joint, and it's still dark, and you can imagine, you put a napkin and you dip it in water and you can see the moisture, start spreading through it. And that's what's happening. It's up the joint and then it's going out like 4 or 5 inches.
It's like a wick.
Yeah. And it's like, all right, I'm going to take more pictures. And then the next day, same thing. And I go to them and I'm like, this is going to fail. And they're like, no, it's not. They're 1.5 inches deep. I guarantee it. So fast forward, it took over a week to fully cure all the way through to where I was comfortable, right? And it's like, all right, we install everything, and then fast forward, I don't know, like 6-8 months later, or something like that.
Not almost a year. It was almost a year.
And it was the first thaw from the winter. So we go back and we get a phone call, and they're like, there's bubbles in the flooring. So I inspect, I take it up, and sure enough, moisture. So it kept on happening, and I'm like, guys, I told you these were not cut joints. And so they overlaid their cold pours from the different pours that they did onto where things were happening, and sure enough, every failure was at a cold joint. And I'm like I'm gonna fix it this time, but I'm not gonna fix it anymore. Like, things happen.
Documentation, and I'm not just saying like from a project manager or company standpoint, like the installers, protect yourselves, like take pictures, log them, put them in a file. If you're Go Carerra installer, throw it in the chat with your company, whoever you're doing the work order for, and show them that you have documented. A lot of times sharing that documentation and people knowing you're documenting that well will get them off of their seat to actually do something about it. So,
and sometimes that's writing down someone's name, a meaningful conversation you have with someone who represents the company or the location you're working at. Write down their name, right? So that way you can, well, who did you talk to? That one
I talked to James at 2:52 on October 15th.
and it's not always about if something's going to fail. It's about protecting yourself with getting paid too, because I've had plenty of times where they're like, why are you charging us so much for all this prep? And then I send them back pictures. This is the material. This is where we prep. This is how we were priming, and stuff like that. And on some of these projects, I go back and I'm talking to them, and they're like, I'm like, is the documentation good enough? And they're like, I can't believe you have all this documented. Like, it goes a long way.
The more they know too, the more that they kind of listen. So,
and something that just protected us recently was pictures of the progress pictures that we require the crews, and they got pictures of stuff that was hanging from the ceilings that was intact when we were done and walked out. And I got a phone call after the project was done saying that we broke a couple things. All right, well, let's take a look. I showed him the pictures. Like, look, it's still hanging. It's still intact in my picture. This is us walking out. Oh.
Must have been someone else.
Now, this topic needs a few shows.
Agreed. I mean, we're at the end of the hour and we've shared a few. I do want to make one quick comment. That's pretty funny that, how we flooring guys say we're blamed for everything. Now you're blamed for ceiling stuff, for stuff on the ceiling.
No, this is not the first time. The other time was at a school, and there's a light fixture like 20 foot up, and he's like, you guys got patch on this light fixture up there. So he mixed some really wet patch, like going like this with the mixer, and then took the bucket and dropped it, and it just went whoop.
And I said, show me how. Show me. Like, tell me how. Like, and I was doing it
to be an a-hole.
I was doing it to be an a-hole. I'm not even lying. I'm not joking. Like, you're gonna blame me for that? Let's go through the scenario. And I did, man. I was really messy with it.
Maybe your guys got a mud wrestling match going. All right. Well, you guys just froze up on me. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, there you are.
There we go.
Sweet. All right. Well, we've come to the end of this episode, guys. Appreciate you sharing some of the stories. It's always, fitting here you know, you talk about Halloween and scary stories in flooring. We worry about this stuff. At least I do. When you just don't know what can go wrong. We got a we're dealing with concrete. We're dealing with so many different aspects when you put flooring down. So again, get trained, talk to people, get plugged into, experts in the industry, and, you'll lower your risk. Like, we make way less failures today than most of my stories are from the early days, and there's a reason for that. So as you get experience and you get trained and, invest in your business, your company, yourself, you lower that risk. So, and document.
Yeah, Jorge says, no, I need more of the huddle. I think one of the biggest things with this topic is being open to share your failures, because a lot of people are like, I'm never going to tell anyone about this. Like, I don't want anyone to know. But it's like, man, we were all brand new ones. We all had to go through it. Like, the more we share our failures with everyone, the less likely anyone else is to repeat them.
Yep. Well, that's the goal. So, all right, gentlemen, until next week, we'll let you go, and good talking with you guys.
Yeah, happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. Go get some candy. We're not going out. It's too cold down here. I don't know what it is up there, but we're sub 30 degrees. I'm like,
it's 34 and snowing, and the kids are, I said, we're going to hit 5 houses real quick, and then I'll buy you candy.
Good plan. All right, gentlemen, we'll chat with you guys later. I need to have a tagline to exit our podcast. I'm always like, all right, we'll see you. Bye. All right.
We'll figure out tagline. We'll get it.
All right. See ya.
Make your suggestions in the comment section. We may adopt yours. All right. See you guys.
See ya.
Take it easy. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.